Hello, I'm Della Mamani, and today I'm going to be presenting my research poster titled The Untamed Tames Chinese Media Censorship. So, a bit of an overview of my poster is that I'm going to be reviewing Chinese media censorship in light of one of the most popular dramas internationally titled The Untamed, where the audience witnesses a developing friendship or bromance between the two main male characters, Lan Zhan and Wei Wuxian. And in these two pictures, on the left is Wei Wuxian and on the right is Lan Zhan. So before I delve into the Untamed specifically, I want to explain a little bit about what censorship in China is really like. So firstly, in order for a show to be broadcasted, it must pass several criteria provided by the government. And China has been known to pull successful shows from the air and ban actors from working together on future projects. This shows how strict and serious they are with media censorship. So, listed below from the provisional rules for the censorship of television dramas implemented in 1909 are a few articles that shows must abide by in order to be broadcasted. So, Article 2 states that television dramas that have not passed examination by the Television Drama Censorship Institution of the Administrative Department for Radio and Television may not be distributed, broadcast, imported, or exported. Secondly, television programs shall adhere to the principle of putting China in first place and manifest the best of China's national traditions. And lastly, television dramas are prohibited from carrying contents that propagate pornography and superstition and play up violence. With these censorship guidelines in mind, you may be wondering what specific groups or communities are frequently targeted by these types of guidelines. And one of the most frequent targets of these guidelines is the LGBTQ plus community. So in China, LGBTQ plus representation and relationships are still a taboo topic. They've even been considered mental illnesses. And CNN states that these censorship guidelines categorize homosexuality as an abnormal sexual behavior unfit for China's TV screens, alongside incest, sexual abuse, and other perversions. And to go further into that point, there's even a special ban that was put in place that specifically applies to the ban on homosexually related content in the media. So, even further into this LGBTQ plus representation is a genre known as BL or boy love. And this type of genre is very frequently targeted by Chinese media guidelines. And BL or boy love is a genre which depicts a romantic relationship between two males. And this genre is actually created by women and is targeted towards a female audience or any sexual minorities that are interested in it. And this type of genre can be found in many forms, such as books, shows, movies, and novels. Now, after learning that LGBTQ plus representation and relationships are frequently targeted by media censorship, you might be wondering how a show that could so obviously display the two main characters' love for each other, such as The Untamed, can still be broadcasted in China. Well, this is thanks to a phenomenon known as the bromance as Masquerade phenomenon. And what this phenomenon does is facilitates the promotion of male intimacy cultivated by the leading actors themselves and the production team in the marketing process. So what they do is they take the romantic affections that their real character counterparts have, and they depict it under the guise of a homosocial bromance. So instead of depicting an explicit love for each other, romantic love, the actors and production team make it so that the two main characters seem like very good, very close guy best friends. And since this tactic is so effective in avoiding Chinese media guidelines, many other popular shows, including The Untamed, have adopted this strategy. Now, with The Untamed, although they have adopted this romance as masquerade phenomenon, they have also used other tactics within the show to display the affection between Lan Zhan and Wei Wuxian. And some of these specific clues are presented throughout the show and correlate to other references within the show, or they relate to specific Chinese traditions. So the first clue that I will be talking about is Lan Zhan's headband. And this clue is based on the context within the show. And pictured here is Lon Jon fixing his headband. So in one of the first few episodes of the show, we understand that the headband is very important to Lon Jon. And when it is sitting crookedly on his head, Wei Wuxian notices that and tries to fix it. But Lon Jon immediately slaps his hand away and refuses his help. But later, in later episodes, Lon Jon uses his headband to physically bind himself to Wei Wuxian in order to protect him. And as the show progresses, there are several moments where Lon Jon actually allows Wei Wuxian to touch or use his headband. And to an outside audience, you might not understand the significance, but if you're actually watching the show, you'll know that Lon Jon and his clan find the headband very sacred, and only parents and significant others can touch it. So if he's allowing Wei Wuxian to touch his headband, that alludes to the point that he may be a significant other. Secondly, there's a motif of rabbits in the show. And they're seen in many different parts of the show. For example, Wei Wuxian paints a rabbit on his and Lon Jon's shared lantern. In a later episode, both Wei Wuxian and Lon Jon are buying a lantern with painted rabbits on it. And in some shots of the show, there are small groups of rabbits populating outside of Lon Jon's home. And some of the scenes of the show are introduced by a short clip of two bunnies nuzzling each other on the nose. And here they are shown. And the great significance behind this actually originates from Chinese mythology. And this Chinese mythology shows that rabbits are a symbol of queerness. And this relates to Tu Shen, which translates to rabbit god. And Tu Shen is actually responsible for managing love and sex between homosexual people. And here are some statues that depict the rabbit god Tu Shen. Thirdly, is a quick scene involving chickens. And even the audience who has watched this show might not have picked up on this clue. But during a scene in the latter half of the show, Wei Wuxian follows a very drunk Lon Jon around a village, and they encounter a house with a chicken coop. And what Lon Jon does is he breaks into the coop and pulls out a chicken and hands it to Wei Wuxian. And he very drunkenly asks him if it's a good chicken, if it's a healthy chicken, if it seems fine. And Wei Wuxian, very confusedly, he just says yes. And it might just look like a weird, funny scene just showing the antics of a drunk Lon Jon, because that is an uncommon occurrence in the show. But the real significance behind this action of his is that gifting chickens is linked to marriage in a variety of ways in some Chinese regions. And in these specific areas, marriage proposals involve a man presenting a woman with a healthy chicken, as well as a variety of other rituals involving chickens during actual wedding ceremonies. And lastly, there is the event of the Ancestral Hall, where towards the end of the show, Wei Wuxian and Lon Jon return to Wei Wuxian's hometown, and they visit the Ancestral Hall where his adoptive ancestors are buried. And they bow to them 3 times in unison. And the real significance behind this is that this sort of bowing ritual is performed exclusively by married couples. So you can infer that if they're doing these types of rituals, they must have some romantic relations with each other. So after listening and considering all of these symbols and clues that are presented throughout the show, you can obviously see that the directors and producers were definitely straying towards presenting romantic relations between Wei Wuxian and Lon Jon, even though they weren't allowed to explicitly state that they were in love. And here are my sources, and I'd like to thank you for listening to my presentation. Thank you.